Hi everybody, Marco Howen here. So, welcome to a new edition of How to Lead Now. And today it's about the ego, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And we are very, very lucky to have today with us Anj from Life's Let Go. Anj, just present yourself if you want to.
Marco, so amazing to be back on your show.
Oh, that's the presentation. I thought you will come like, I don't know.
I was let me silence my ego. If I start saying I have like certifications, I'm a certified professional coach. I was like, let me silence my ego now.
Well, the challenge is if we both silence our ego now, should we meditate? I just take out the ball,
Let's do that.
take out the ball. Let's do that. So let's just so that was not foreseen.
That is such a beautiful sound. I love that sound.
So I said today we're talking about the ego. So what is ego? What is there good ego? Is there bad ego? Is there very, very bad ego? How do you get aware of that? We talk about how to let go of this ego. So a lot of things on our plate to talk about. And I wanted to kick it off with a quote I found while preparing for today, which is a quote from Deepak Chopra. And so he says, the ego is not who you really are. The ego is your self-image. It is your social mask. It is the role you are playing. Your social mask thrives on approval. It wants control and it's sustained by power because it lives in fear. So my first question would be, how does ego and fear work together?
I love that quote from Deepak Chopra. You know what shows up for me, Marco? I feel when I look at fear is very future rooted. If you look at fear as a resource, it's rooted in the future. I'm scared of spiders. What is going to happen to me if I'm scared of spiders? I can imagine them crawling. So when you connect ego and fear, you're going into the future is what shows up for me. So you're concerned about how you look in the public eye, what your self-worth is defined by the measurement world. You know,
Mhm.
you're living in a very metrics-driven society.
Absolutely. And if I would ask you just simply, what is ego for you? Like, does it really represent for you personally?
So many things, that show up for me. Like, from a psychological point of view, it's defined as a function of your mind. But to me personally, it can be so many different things depending upon my state of mind. My need to be right, as I feel like there is also a need to prove you wrong. My need to feel really loved in the moment, as I push the people that I love away. My whole concept of my identity and my self-importance in a measurement world where that importance is not just sheerly being enjoyed from a place of pure presence. So I look at ego, Marco, as something that is very sort of, what should I say, like a validation seeking, task oriented, outcome control oriented state of mind.
So when we talk about ego, what comes up for me is that we we really we are really ego is everywhere. Ego is all the time. And now we are talking about ego most of the times about the negative side. But in essence, ego encompasses everything. It's like ego encompasses the fact that we go downstairs, open up the fridge, and eat something because we want to live. So ego is from that perspective everything. So there is this, and I remember very well when I was a long time ago, I was not thinking about ego and talking about ego with friends, and I always thought about this good and there's the bad ego. I don't know if there's a good or bad ego these days, but at that time I really defined it like that. So it's like this good ego wanting to help people or wanting to survive, wanting to be there, and the bad ego, which is more rooted in fear, and rooted in not wanting to really drive, confront your own fears. That's what I say. So I like the quote when Deepak talks about fear in that perspective. And actually, I have another quote open here, which actually comes from Eckhart Tolle. He just talks more about fear than about ego, but it resonates. So Eckhart Tolle says, fear seems to have many causes: fear of loss, fear of failure, fear of being hurt, and so on. But ultimately, all fear is the ego's fear of death, of annihilation. To the ego, death is always just around the corner. In this mind-identified state, fear of death affects every aspect of your life.
Wow.
What comes up for you when you hear this?
Fear of death is something that doesn't scare me so much. For me, it's more like choosing to sometimes die when we are living. Remember, we had talked about that we choose so many times. We choose death while you and I are like living. So for me, fear of not living my life to my fullest potential. Passion is one thing, but purpose, my why, that is what shows up for me. And now, when I reflect back and look at ego, how it showed up for me, Marco, a few years ago versus, what my relationship with ego is now. I like what you had said. It's healthier. Ego can also be healthy, right? So, so that is what shows up for me. I feel like there's less fear now as opposed to in the past. After coaching,
Well, and I think what you say makes and it's um, fear of death. So, but death is a big word. Death is I'm falling from this chair back and I'm dead. So that's death when we're talking about death, which we think about. But death is everything. What is stopping? What is not going on? What will not be continued? And the ego is, as I see it, in the continuation of things, in the continuation of me being whatever. Like when I can take these stories. When I was um, running some of my companies, I really felt I was so intertwined with the company that actually I was not I was not separated from it anymore. My ego was linked directly to that company, and when it didn't work the way out the way I wanted, my whole world was shattered and everything was breaking apart because this ego was dying. But at the end, the best what can happen to us is when they die. So I think Eckhart Tolle doesn't talk so much about the death at itself, but it's really the death of the ego itself. It's like my ego of being a global international businessman that died. Fine, I'm still there.
yeah.
I feel better than before. So so well now what are the egos? So what could be the egos we could have? What different egos you see?
I like when what showed up for me when you were talking about Eckhart Tolle and like, how you define death. You still here, like you said, and yes, you are, and how, right? But how coaching. But I also look at it like, death in like little moments, how ego sometimes can kill, can cause death, little moments that make your life beautiful. Like, like I was just reflecting back yesterday, my son is now my older son Arjun is very fluent in German. And, he was reciting an essay that he wrote. And in that moment, I was like, Arjun, can we do this later? I need you to finish your dinner. It was my ego wherein I really wanted him to do, focus on the task at hand. I didn't allow him to be playful. So I also feel like sometimes, how your relationship with ego and control can, cause death to those little beautiful moments.
Yeah, absolutely. I just looked at sorry, I just looked at the remarks on social media. So hi Laurie, thank you for being here. So Laurie signs in from Boston,
Hey, Laurie.
and oh yeah, and Laurie asks actually to talk about that we would like would love us to talk about your beautiful quote which you came up with. Ego interrupts intuition.
I
How,
wish
for
I
us
could
as
do
coaches, how do we keep our ego in check to stay present and be of the highest service to our clients? That's a very beautiful question. You're a coach, Laurie, because the question is really good.
that. Laurie's a fabulous coach. Actually, that wasn't my quote, Laurie. I think it's Nancy Laporte who said that ego interrupts intuition. And would you like to go first, Marco, or would you like me to?
No, no, please shoot, shoot, shoot.
So I just feel like, I'm really able to jive and connect with those words. Your intuition is this part of you, your sixth sense that sort of, tells you like the things that you feel in your gut. Like there is no scientific proof for that, but you say that, what, I feel it in my belly, I feel it in my gut. And there is a certain way that can go, but then your ego tells you no. You become control minded, and you have a fixed mindset because you're used to doing things a certain way, and you are not you land up never exploring. So I feel like ego sometimes can make you it stops you from being like Dora the Explorer, like being fun in the moment. you know that's what shows up for me.
Yeah, and what I love about that quote is ego interrupts intuition. It's like when I got into this journey of becoming a coach, my logic was, oh yeah, anyhow, I'm a coach anyhow. I'm coaching people since so long, and actually, the simple fact that I said that was already showing that I am not. And what was showing for me is that over time, I started to trust my intuition. I started to trust my intuition, and I got out of my head. I got into my intuition. And as a coach, to Laurie, to your question, Laurie, as a coach, I think when we are in our intuition, there is no ego, because at that moment we are not voicing what our head says. We are not saying. It happens so often to me during a coaching session that I say things which I actually my mind says milliseconds later. It's like, how can you say that? Or how can you come up with that? Or why do you do that? And it's because just it had to be done at that moment. So it's actually the death of ego, because the intuition lives, for me at least, doesn't live in here. It lives here, or it lives here. It lives somewhere in that area. So it really lives in our body. It's something which comes from the gut, which comes from the heart. And as soon as I get it out without without going through this filter, it's no ego. As long as, and I feel that actually very often when coaching sessions, go for me in my perspective, go into way too technical or too about how to run the company, how to raise money, and so all this old stuff I did in my life, which I like to do, I'm right back into my head. So I'm not talking about, so I'm not intuitive at the moment. I'm actually sharing my ego, maybe sharing what I learned, what I know, my interpretation of what I knew, which at the end is part of my ego, good or bad. That's another discussion. But it is part of my experience, part of what I learned. So that's what comes up for me, Laurie, on that question.
I love what you just shared, Marco. And when you're able to, what shows up for me in relation to what you just expressed is that, when you trust your intuition in that moment, that word that shows up is you choosing to trust yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And in a coaching session, when you're able to trust yourself, is when you're also intuitively sort of really listening to what your client is probably not even expressing. It's not just listening to what they're saying, but also listening to what is not being told.
Yeah.
I feel like intuition is very strong in that zone sometimes.
Yeah. So let us just wrap up for a second, because now we talked about what is ego. So we don't have a fully blueprint answer to that, but ego is always linked in fear, always linked in the few, like ego is always linked in linked with how we perceive things for the future, or in this link to his own fear of death, means that it is not there anymore, the ego. So that could be maybe something we could say as an little takeaway of our first big question we wanted to tackle today.
Yeah,
What
I
do
love that.
Okay.
Yeah, you're right.
So
Because in ego is it's like you're performance oriented. When you have an ego mindset, you are playing a game because you don't want to lose that game. But when your ego is silenced, and like Laurie says, when you allow intuition to come into a space of being and you trust yourself, then you put yourself in a mastery orientation, where it's more about enjoying the moment, choosing to live and not die in the moment, and really celebrate life.
I love that. Ego is letting go of ego is choosing to live in that moment. That's a beautiful quote. We should write that down. Let give you have to talk now. I have to write that down. No, we have it on tape, so we can take it.
Marco, I
Can
read
take it.
the cutest definition I read was let go of the E, let it go. Skip the E and let go.
Oh, that's
Go. Skip
beautiful.
the E and let go.
Live and let go.
Skip the E and let go. Ego.
No, I just redid your logo. Huh? Life is let ego. Okay, go. Okay, now we're getting silly. That's cool. I'm getting. So maybe now we talked about what is ego. Now, what are the good and bad sides of ego? Because if this is there and it is running our all lives, as we say, what are the good and bad sides?
What do you want to tackle first? The bad side, the ugly side, or the good side? What are you in the mood for right now?
That's a very very good question, and I would answer to that. I don't care.
Let's look at the good side of ego, shall we?
Oh, please.
I was looking at the good side of ego. I'll take a personal example. So my children and I were playing basketball 2 days ago. We have a little hoop outside. And my oldest son, when he was shooting, my little one goes, "Come on, Arjun, just channel in Michael Jordan." So I feel the good side of ego is that sometimes you can develop these little alter egos. You know how in our coaching, when we are coaching our clients, we tell them that imagination is reality, like Pablo Picasso says. Anything that you can imagine can become real. So, in sports, in a high stress business environment, if you want to channel in this super alter ego where you want to believe that you're capable of something larger than life, then, an alter ego can allow you to accomplish that. And true to that, my son actually scored a three-pointer. I don't know if it was luck. I'd like to believe he was channeling in Michael Jordan.
But I love that you came up with Michael Jordan, because some months ago I binge watched the series of Michael Jordan's career, so on Netflix. I was
Mhm.
really interesting, and no, I was a big fan of Michael Jordan when he was playing. So I love to see the series, the series. But in the last episode, I think it was the last one, whatever. I felt this incredible sadness of not having achieved enough. He said it when he talked about the fact that the Bulls decided to pull the plug on the team, and well, they gave him the possibility, but mainly fired everybody else, and he just said, "Well, that's not how it goes," and he walked away, and I thought, wow, you have achieved so much. Your ego, because you have to have some ego to go there. And then you are at that point of your life, and you are still 20 years later, you are still referred to be the greatest of all times, and most likely will stay like that. And you are still so suffering because you didn't get another shot at yet another ring.
Yeah.
So that's for me a really a bad side of ego. Not the fact that he got all these rings. I think that's amazing. The fact that as you cannot let go of it, you cannot let go of the fact you always want more. It never stops. It's never enough. I think
In,
I felt sad. Honestly, I felt sad. Not that I really felt sad for him.
I can imagine, yeah, I can hear that in your voice. You know what shows up for me when you shared that Michael Jordan story is, where does ego live in our brain? In my imagination, I feel, Marco, like if our thoughts are in our conscious brain, and imagine that if our brain is like a computer, freaking hard to use computer, at least I haven't mastered the user manual to use mine. It doesn't listen to me most of the times, but I'm trying, and I'm trying. So, Marco, what shows up for me is I imagine that, our beliefs and our values. Like I'm imagining Michael Jordan's beliefs are living in his subconscious. That's where the ego lives, in the subconscious. Like even though that is these beliefs that we hold, like I need that one extra thing to feel successful. So mastering, maybe having a healthier relationship with the beliefs that you and I hold in our life can make us have a healthier relationship with our ego. Because at the end of the day, it's all invented, right? Rosamund Zander said that. It's all invented. It's a story you and I are telling ourselves. This whole ego story.
Yeah, and well, that counts to everything is illusion, and we can really go. Or we're all living in the matrix, so we do another. We can do another live on that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we are coming up with these stories, and we are holding on to the stories. Um, the facts are very clear and simple.
Yeah.
Well, not these days when you look at politics and so on, but facts are facts. Like living and dying are facts. Rain and sun are facts, and so on. My ego will tell me when it rains, it's like I really need sun, because he doesn't he wants to live on in that story. the fact is it's raining, and you know our favorite quote is nothing has meaning until we give it meaning, and
Yeah.
and that's exactly what is play here. So our ego, when we are driving, when we are in a difficult, let me tell a story, actually, one where my ego really went wild, and it's a little bit of a private story. And at one moment in time, it's like I have this two very very good friends here in my village, which are friends since really early childhood. So we're living close by, and one day, one of these friends, he got his first child, and so I helped them, and I supported them, and it was really a beautiful time. And then they chose. So in my mind, my ego created something. It created, I want to be the godfather of this child. And then came the birth, and then they asked somebody else, and I was so wounded. I not angry, but I so like a knife going through my heart, and went on for month and month, and they had no time. Well, newly married, that's a long time ago, but newly married, newly. And then one day I said, okay, we I have to talk to him. So we went for beer, and I talked to him. I told him how much that hurt me, and so, and during when I telling it, it's so ridiculous. It was ridiculous, but the ego had like this story. It's like, it's like that has to happen. It's like talk, 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 talk. It has to happen, and it didn't. And then the ego hold on to it, and thought to create a story. It was really a story for me, and getting aware of that was really the ego was very important for me. It really helped me to, well, to get aware of that. That's our next question we'll tackle, but that's, yeah.
But you shared that in Pat Riley. He puts that so beautifully. He calls ego the disease of me. At the end of the day, it's all about you and me. It's that story. It's the disease of me. I mean, we're talking about the bad side of ego, the
Who said
bad side.
that? Pat Riley?
Pat Riley said that.
Oh well, we're all into NBA tonight. I like that.
And
But
I
actually, it's the disease of me, and it becomes myself. I would even say that,
yeah, it
because
becomes myself. Yeah.
because me, yeah, me is without ego. Me disease is myself. Oh, we're really going into Tolle here, but okay. So
But I think,
what are the stories? Like, how did ego show up for you in your life? Do you have something you want to share?
of course, now when I reflect back, like, I mean, ego shows up for me all the time, but I feel I'm less egoistic today than I was even a couple of years ago, Marco. I think I was a fairly egoistic person. With though I also, I feel one is competitive when one is egoistic. You want to do better than others. And you want to prove a point so that your validation comes from the success that is defined in the outside world. So I felt like a lot of my food was coming from outside validation. Is there an echo in my voice, Marco?
Sorry.
Is my voice echoing back?
Now
I
it's
can.
better again. So at one moment in time it was not good. Now it's better again. I don't know why. Well, we have to work on that.
Yeah. So yeah, so what I was saying was I feel like I'm less egoistic now, and I feel the best way feel I'm able to measure that is how my relationships today have changed with specifically my children. I feel like I'm less control oriented, less outcome oriented.
Mm.
You know,
It's actually, the ego has always everything planned. The ego
Exactly.
knows always what's the next step. The ego knows all that, and we're talking about ego, but we could also talk about our monkey mind somehow. Because at the end, it's I don't know if it's really similar. We should go deeper on that one, but it's the same. It's for sure similar, and it always wants to have control. The ego always wants to control what happens, and that actually in these days, that's when everything is uncertain and we have no clue what will happen to us. We'll have no clue how our economies will react on what just happens in the world around us. Like a year without a real functioning economy, and there's another year ahead of us. How do we get out of that? We almost didn't survived Lehman Brothers crashing in 2008. How is it possible that still everything is working? So it's all that for me. We are in a situation where the unknown, the we don't know what happens. So today, all of our egos are challenged, because if we have planned out our life, if we have everything, that's gone for most of the people. I always say for most of, not for the 80% of Luxembourgers who are under state pay, but for the rest of the world it is, and it is it's very painful. That's actually what I would describe as the pain we are seeing right now in the world, is this deep fear or lose of control of what happens next. So we are all forced to find something else. So maybe coming back to Laurie, intuition is the next control.
Yeah. And when you were talking, I was just thinking, have you heard about this? This is a story. So this person goes to Lord Buddha and says, I want to find happiness.
Mm-hmm.
So Lord Buddha says, first take out the I, because the I comes from ego, and then the want comes from desire. So when you take
Mm-hmm.
those two things out, what remains is happiness. I feel like that is such a beautiful description to what you just said, because what shows up for me today is that why do I have less ego today? Because I'm less fearful. When you've gone through like heartbreak and when you've gone through loss, you feel like I've come now at a point where I've already lost so much. So now what do I build from there? You know, your ego is silenced in that moment. And that gives you an opportunity to recalibrate, to regenerate from a place of real authenticity and alignment with your values and beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I feel like sometimes when you go through some sort of loss, it's like an automatic check, like a thermometer check with your ego. What was I holding on to? How much of it was fake? How happy did it really make me? How is humility serving me today? Like, I often ask myself sometimes, like, what would a more humble person think in a similar situation, Ange?
Interesting, because what comes up for me is, how do we define, uh, how do we turn the knob between good and bad ego?
Lovely question. If you and I can find the exact answer in this moment, Marco, we can become millionaires.
No, no, I'm not agreeing. We become billionaires for sure, like
Exactly.
that. But that's the question, because as I said, it's like both of us being in front of a camera now talking is ego.
Yeah,
I don't think that's bad. I hope nobody else
I
who's
think it's
listening.
great.
I think it's and there's so many things. I would what comes up for me is I would link it to intention. What's my intention? What's the intention behind? The intention here for me is just sharing and being in a free flow, and maybe giving some nuggets for somebody who's listening to it, and he says, oh shit, I never thought about that, that's great for me. and if one person will say that, then that's amazing. So I would then consider that as being a good ego.
Yeah.
When if I would do this in order to manipulate somebody into something doing as I think he has to do it, then that I would call a bad ego. So that for me, so to bring, because that was our question now. So what is good and what is bad ego? That's how I would explain it for me. How do you see that? The
What
knob.
exactly what you said is exactly what I feel. What I would just, the only thing I would add to that, I don't want to repeat what you said because I feel very much like that as well, is now I feel like then we can see more of a we in the me, becoming more of a contribution. That is also my desire. Like, how can I become a contribution, when I'm like in the coaching space, to be able to raise the consciousness of the person who has come to in the coaching space, that I feel stokes your ego in a very good way
Yes,
because you were
absolutely.
able to let that person connect their dots and they walked away with meaning and heart and meaning in their life. It also stokes my self worth because we do need an ego to operate. Because if I don't have an
Exactly.
ego, then I don't want to succeed in life. I'm not setting up my purpose, my passion, right? But if we put some boundaries around our passion, then I feel the ego is in check a little bit. Then we are focusing more on the good ego.
I would like to challenge that for a second, just being devil's advocate here. Why do we need a purpose and a passion?
Why do I need? I can only answer for
No,
myself.
no, well, as human beings, why our society, why we're saying we need a purpose and a passion? I'm driven like that and I function like that. I just asked the question. If we as human beings not necessarily know our purpose, necessarily know our passion, necessarily if we are living quiet lives, not the right word. If we are living a life where we are not evolving uh, with negative impulses, negative influences, where we're just living our life. There are people who do that. I always admire somebody who just lives his life without. I admire that because I can't. So
Marco, it's amazing. If so, somebody asked me just the other day, Ange, what is your goal in life? And I was like, you know what, dude, to be honest with you, very simply put, I just want to go to bed happy every night. I know.
oh, that's
So if not having a passion and purpose for you allows you to go to bed happy every night, more power to you, Marco. Live that
it's actually
passion and purpose.
it's beautiful because what you say, what comes up for me when you say that is that in the end, it's not about the purpose. It's just about, I call it our biochemistry. It's
Yeah.
like, how can I influence my biochemistry that I feel good today? Because it's my body, it's my appearance, it's who I am. How can I feel good today? That's
Damn
the
it.
question.
I love that. I love that. And you know what? You just answered the first question that we were talking about. Like, how do we know this is good versus bad ego? Check that in with your feelings. At the
Yeah.
end of the day, you're trying so hard to, like get that multi-million-dollar contract and drive your Porsche, live in this sexy house, and then you go to bed unhappy every night. And what you feel inside is unfulfillment.
Mhm.
There goes, what part of ego, which ego are you, which sister are you stoking?
Totally. It's exactly what happens to so many people, and it's I call it the abyss of meaningless.
Yeah.
People are just watching, like, no, I met a lot of these people, very successful people, and then they look, and then they cannot stop. It's a little bit what I talked about Michael Jordan.
Yeah.
It's like, what's I have to do that again and again and again and again and again, because it never stops, because the ego never stops. I'm never happy. I'm never fulfilled. It's sad.
And remember, we talked about that. Success without fulfillment is not really success, at least not in my world, not
Yeah,
today,
but
in this
that's
moment.
it's always about how you define success, and this nice phrase comes from Tony Robbins, and I
Yeah.
was living by that phrase for years. Now,
Yeah.
the fact that it is already defining success very succinctly to financial and so on, that's already the problem at the basis. So we should not talk about any success specifically just about fulfillment.
Yeah.
Why do we say all we talk all success is fulfillment? But
Yeah.
there is nothing else than fulfillment.
Right.
So let me get well, we normally say we do 45 minutes. I think we will do a little bit more because
I'm
we
loving
still
this.
have let's go for 2 hours. No, I'm kidding. Um, let
Hey,
me
I'm
just
game.
ask this
I'm game. My ego is silent at the
question.
moment. I'm game.
Now we talked about what is ego. We talked about the good and the bad of ego. Now that's nice, but let's talk about how do we get aware of ego?
How do we
How
get?
do we get aware that ego is in play? How do we get aware of our ego? Because at the end, if we want to decide and use our NAP, I talked about before, well, we have to get aware that that's ego, and then we have to say, okay, well, what's my intention behind? What do I want to go on with that? Do I want to release it, get rid of it? So how do we get aware of that ego is in play?
That's such an amazing, incredible question. Words are just words, but we put the meaning into the words. And for me, I feel like when negative ego shows up, because we defined ego as being good and bad, again, there's judgment in the words, but for the sake of simplicity, I feel like when I'm going on a bad ego trip, I feel like when I come home to myself, I feel like I've been dishonest. I've violated my core values. I feel unhappy. I feel heaviness in my heart. I feel stress. Um, I feel like an imposter. I feel like a bully. I feel like a liar. I feel dishonest. So, success, and I've created success outside. But if I'm feeling all these things in my heart, that's not, then that is, I feel, a good way for me to feel more aware as to, what I've just created.
Mhm. Yeah, I love what you say, and actually, what pops up for me is this morning I was in a board meeting of a company I created almost 20 years ago, and I'm totally disconnected from the company. So I'm just in the board. I'm not operationally. I'm even not a shareholder anymore. Just there, and all these thoughts coming back
Mm.
of questioning what I'm doing, questioning where I'm going, questioning how I will do a great living out of it, and all that thoughts coming back. That's the ego coming back. The ego of I want that life was this and this life is that. And it's interesting for me to because I didn't see that at that moment like that, but I felt like that. I needed to take a good walk, which helped me to get grounded and to get back to what I'm doing. So for me, getting aware of it is when all kinds of old thoughts are popping up, like thoughts I
Yeah.
was not thinking for a long time, or which are disempowering and always were disempowering and just come up again. That's where, and I say, oh, what ego is here? And then the ego here is very clear. It's like, I created that company. I'm not there anymore, and I would love to be still more part of it. One part of my ego would love to. It's like all that BS comes up during that, and then creates these thoughts. Then creates, let's go through that. Then creates a biochemistry which makes you feel bad, and so, nah, not really what. So that's for me getting aware of it, or an example of how I get aware of it.
That's very interesting, what you just shared, Marco. You said that, you come home to sometimes with these thoughts that you didn't even know existed. But then, when ego is at play, it brings you closer to some of the thoughts maybe that you had been suppressing and you weren't aware that they then come into light. I was also wondering, do you think ego plays into like superiority complex? I'm superior than you, or he's inferior than me. When you were in
That's
an ego,
clearly
yeah,
it's clearly ego. It's like I have so much experience. I'm so much better than. And actually, that's how I showed up at the first at our first module at the coaching school. It's like, okay, I'm the oldest one here. Let's just get over it. I want this uh, certification, and as I always said, I said it so many times, like all our cohorts, it's like you're all my biggest teachers, because it's so amazing to see how you could evolve, how you evolved, and how I could evolve and could look and see that evolution, and it's just beautiful. So like that's the heart speaking, but at that moment was the head. And it's like, okay,
yeah,
and that gets us all the time. I and the power before we can let it go, because that's our next question. But the power before we can let it go is to get aware of it. So I think to wrap that up, I think it's very important to just listen to negative thoughts, listen
yeah.
to listen to things which make you angry or sad, because that are indicators that, oh, we're talking about ego, we're talking about something. What is the real reason about my sadness? Not that something happens there or there, but what's the real reason of my anger?
I love that.
Because
It's
I'm losing something.
listening to those thoughts without any filter,
Yes, yes.
just listening to those thoughts, because ego is in the mind. So, yeah, you're right. I love that. You summarized it beautifully.
So, and then, so to wrap it up, because we are just 3 minutes over, so let's wrap it up with a last question. And I think now we know what ego is. We have a way of to find our knob to decide what is good or bad. Ego. Now we can get aware of the ego. Now how can we let go of the ego, the bad ego, or the unwanted ego? How can we let go of that?
I think we all learn best from our own personal examples. I feel like, when I look back at instances where ego has not served me well, I feel if success leaves cues, failure leaves even bigger cues. So, have an unfiltered conversation from something in the past that has left you broken. And also, I feel like, when you come from a growth mindset, because when you're showing up egoistic, you're not really learning. So when you tell yourself that this is the game of life that I really want to enjoy, and if I'm going to be the only person in the playground, how much am I going to learn? And that creates a very subtle shift in your mindset.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. And for what comes up for me is when to let go of ego. First thing is take a deep breath in, and a deep breath out, and just stop. Just stop for a second. Just lift the foot and stop. And just ask yourself, is this thought process now, am I in a spiral, or am I still thinking clearly? Because very often the ego ramps up, like the story with my friend, where over weeks and months I wasn't able. It really affected me, and find the moment to just be aware. When we are aware of it, just ask yourself why. What does how does that make sense?
Yeah.
And then just let it go.
Marco, est-ce que tu peux m'aider pour juste moi une seconde?
Sorry, 1 second.
I love children.
Okay. No.
Yeah, you're right, Marco. You said that so beautifully.
Yeah. So I would love to actually wrap it up. And anything last words you would love to say?
Skip the E and let it go.
Oh, skip the E and let it go. I love it. I think on that yeah. Thank everybody who was listening today, and tonight almost. It's starting to get a little bit dizzy, and looking forward to talk to you next time. Thank you, Anj, for taking the time.
Marco, I just love these little chats. This is so amazing.
Let me just amazing. So, bye bye.
Bye.